Well, since Rob and Shane didn't want to preach, I guess I will. Come on. No, that was good, especially like the part where you gave that kid $5, some random kid in Walmart. Because once you did that, he became it wasn't just about you, he became kind of a part of us, right? So it's that other love, and I've been really thinking about the Lord's Prayer recently, and it is such a deep prayer, and it's so simple, and it's basically how the Lord told us how to pray. And I always thought the Lord's Prayer was like, yeah, I guess, whatever. I'm praying in tongues for 3 hours, bro. And no, I'm like, really? Like, I used to pray quite a bit. And I always kind of I didn't really dive into it, but I really started reading it, and I put a reminder on my phone. And I encourage everybody to do this because it's so incredible when you start doing it. I put a reminder on my phone at 7 a.m., at 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. So I'm praying 3 times a day. And, it pops up, and I'm like, give me my daily bread. Lead me away from temptation. That's the type of thing I'm praying. But I'm not praying that. What I'm praying is give us our daily bread, right? So I'm praying not only for me, but I'm praying for you. And I'm not only praying for you, but it's like a global type, bring heaven down to earth type thing. And that's super heavy. It's so deep, but it's so simple. And this is, I've been reading it out of the Message. That's kind of what I did, and it's in Matthew 6. That's where it's at. But this is the prayer that I've been praying. Our Father, and it's almost like the Father's prayer instead of the Lord's Prayer. It's like a total Father prayer. Because what does a father do? He thinks about his family, us, right? He thinks about us. And this prayer gets me thinking about you. And it's so rad. It's so cool. Because I'm not just praying for me, man. But and when we start doing that, when we stop focusing on ourselves, something changes and something happens. Because it's not like, oh, Lord, help me, my, me. No, it's like an us thing. And this church has brought me, God, where's Doug at? God, I'm like channeling my inner Doug, and I don't want to. Gosh. But I'm just like him, so that's cool. But anyway, this church, man, it's brought me into an us, right? And it has ever since I've been around, It has when I started coming here in Chino, when I'd pop in and out. But anyway, I'm going to go to the Lord's Prayer. It says, Our Father in heaven, reveal who you are, set the world right. Yes. And how does he do it? With us, right? Right? Because then it goes into this. Do what's best, as above, so below. Keep us alive with 3 square meals. I don't like that too much. I like give us our daily bread a lot better. But anyway, that's Eugene Peterson. And then it says, keep us, not me, keep us forgiven with you and forgiving others. Keep us safe from ourselves and the devil. And then this part right here is so cool. You're in charge. You can do anything you want. You're ablaze in beauty. Yes. Isn't that cool? God, it's so awesome. So I'm doing that 3 times a day, and it's not like a big thing. It's just where I'm at. I'm like, Lord, give us our daily bread. Lord, keep me at it. And sometimes it's more temptation for me. I'm like, Lord, keep us out of temptation. Come on. So, and then I was looking at the prodigal son story, because I know that it had been gone over recently in our church, and some really good thoughts have been given out. And in the prodigal son story, you have a younger son who is selfish, who goes out and does just whatever he wants, and he's just thinking about me. And then you have an older brother who's completely entitled, who is selfish too, who is jealous, who is angry, who is just as bad as the younger brother, right? And then we have a father in the middle. And that father is so us-minded because he's running and he's standing next to his other son. And we have those 2 brothers. Like, we don't have 2 wolves. Well, we kind of do, especially you. But no, we have these 2 wolves living inside of us. We've heard that story a million times, right? We really have 2 brothers living inside of us. And those brothers want to be like the father. And the only way that they can do that is if they stop looking at themselves and start looking at each other, right? And get just completely us-minded. And that's our progression as Christians, right? We want to get into that. Stop being, and I'm still, so I see the older brother and the younger brother in me all the time. You know, I can think, oh, well, look at them, they're doing that, whatever. You can get mixed up in it. But really what I want to do is I want to be just like my father, right? Right? And that's where we can go with this. And looking at the prodigal son story that way, not necessarily focusing too much on each of the brothers, but the father, it's huge. It's huge because that's who we want to be like in that story. And because that father is praying the Lord's Prayer for his kids. He is 100%. And there's a song I've been listening to over and over and over this week. And it says, I desire to be like you, like any son or father, like any son or daughter. I want to be like my father. I desire to be like you. You promised to never forsake me. So I'll risk it all if you make me like you, right? Right? And we can look across this assembly right now. You can look at your own fathers. I can look at like my spiritual fathers, and I'm looking at, I could just start naming everybody in this assembly, right? But, you know, because I want to be like them. So many people in this church, I've modeled my life after. Like Sarah, she's gone right now, but she's with Julie, and we lived with Rob and Julie for a while. And like, she had a bracelet that said WWJD. What would Julie do? I'm kidding. No, but Julie's discipled her. That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? And you guys have discipled me. And it's just so incredible when we think about the usness instead of the meanness, right? Right? And if we start really walking in that, we're going to bring heaven to earth.
It's good words, good songs. Trust that you've already received something from the Lord here today. I know I have. That songs, there was a theme in the first two songs, and it was, "It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you." So what looks to be reality, there's something else that's actually at work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And then there was the next song. It had the line in it that said, "I've been in prison and I've been in chains." And so there are things that we can be bound up in, or we can bind ourselves up in. There are things that can cause us to be captivated by this world. That's why the Lord's Prayer says, "Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." There's things that we can give ourselves over to, and there's things that can overtake us. And what was the last song? There was a... Yes. And it said, "I'm going to walk out on the water. Lead me wherever you may lead me." And so when we start to take action for God, and we like Peter, that little story there of Peter walking out on the water showed his kind of chutzpah. He was in this moment of fear and uncertainty. He stepped out and asked to step out on the water. We look at the fact that he sunk, but the fact is he stepped out on the water. Pretty powerful. So when we do start our journeys, don't be surprised if you're not like Peter and you sometimes miss the mark and you fall short. So what is that? Prisons, pits, chaotic waters. These are all the things that kind of come against us. We're going to look at a couple of those. And over here in Genesis 37th chapter, you're going to see the story of Joseph. And in Genesis 37 verse 1, it says that Jacob dwelled in a land where his father was a stranger. Now Jacob's father's name was Isaac, and Isaac's father's name was Abraham. So this is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what is the rest of the scriptures call the patriarchs or the fathers. So Jacob is this father in Israel, but he was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And verse 2 says, this is the history of Jacob. And then immediately he starts with the last son that has been born to him, Joseph, being 17 years old. At this time, the last one was 17 years old, and he was feeding the flocks with his brothers. And he brought back a bad report to his brother about his brothers. Probably didn't set well with them. It didn't, actually, because later on we're going to see that they hated him because of it, verse 4. But he said that Jacob loved his son Joseph, and he gave him a coat of many colors, and above all of his children he loved him. And when the brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. And then Joseph started dreaming, and that got him even more trouble. So here's this jealousy that these brothers have, rightfully so, by the way. My God, a father to the point, the true father that's exemplified in the story of the prodigal son is a father who both stands next to the one and runs after the other. There is no favoritism in the prodigal son story because the father has no favorites. But here, Jacob is following after the same failures that his father failed in. Remember? It said that Isaac loved Esau because of the venison that Esau would capture, but Rachel loved Jacob. So now we have this kind of dysfunctional family experience that's just trickling down to another generation. No wonder Moses says, the curse goes to the second and the third generation. This is what This is what can happen if we're not careful. So Joseph has a dream, and in this dream, basically his brothers are bowing down to him. And then he has another dream, and it's not just his brothers, but it's his mother and father. The sun and the moon and his 12 brothers are all, the stars are bowing down to Joseph. And it says in verse 11 that his brothers envied him, but the father kept these matters in his mind. Then his brothers went and fed the father's flock at Shechem, and Jacob said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding their flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So Jacob sends Joseph to go check on his brothers. He was probably a little worried about them. Like, what are they getting into now? Go and see if you can find your brothers, verse 14 says. See if it's well with the flocks and bring word back to me. So he sent him to the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found Joseph, and there Joseph was wandering in a field. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" So important to notice that this man steps onto the scene. Joseph doesn't reach out to him. The man just engages in the conversation. Joseph is wandering, which means he's lost. So Joseph is lost. This man comes and engage him, a certain man. The same word that's used here is used when 3 certain men came to Abraham. And we find out later on that 2 of those men were angels that went down to Sodom, and one was the angel of the Lord, or the Lord himself. Another time when a certain man attaches himself to Jacob is when Jacob is wrestling with the angel, but it doesn't call him an angel there. It says he wrestled with this man all night. And when he was done, he realized who he had been wrestled with. He says, "I've seen God face to face and I did not die." So here, this certain man is thrust into the story, finding the wandering Joseph. And he says, "What are you looking?" He says, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks." And the man said to them, "They've departed from here. I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers, and he found them in Dothan. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near, they conspired against him to kill him. It may look like you're surrounded, but I'm surrounded by him. That's the theme of our life. It was the theme of Joseph's life. It may look like he was at disadvantage, but God had something he was doing and working out right there in this moment. They said to one another, "Look at this dreamer coming. Come, therefore, let us kill him and cast him into some pit, that we may see some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." You know what? We can enter into life. There are things that can come against us. There are things that God may inspire us to do. He may call us out on the waters, but there may be times when we'll see what comes of this man's dreams or this woman's dreams, or God's dream for you. What has God destined you for? People may think they can thwart the plan of God by their actions that they take. And he's saying, let's see what happens to his dreams. This is really just a flashback to the first beast that wanted to devour Adam and Eve. It goes to the beast that was in Cain, that was lying at the door, that wanted to devour his brother in the field. See, now they're out in a field here, and he killed his brother Abel in the field. He did not allow the beast that was in him to be put down. You know that the number one thing that as people of God that we have to do is we have to give ourselves over to God and let that beast that can rise up. You may be a destined child of God like these 11 brothers were, or these 10 brothers were. You may be destined to be the people of God and still have a beast inside you. So they cast him into the pit. They stripped off his clothes in verse 23. And they cast him, verse 24, into the pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So now Joseph is as far away from the fulfillment of his dream as he could possibly be. He's looking through a pinhole of light in this pit that he's found himself in, looking up into the stars of heaven that he was supposed to be exalted above. And it says, and they sat down to eat a meal. Look at these devourers. We will say that a beast has devoured him. We will say that a beast has devoured him, and now they sit down to eat a meal, hearing the voice and the cries of their brother down in the pit. And they lifted up their eyes, and there was a company of Ishmaelites, second cousins to these men. These are descendants of their great-grandfather's other son, Ishmael. And they came, coming from Gilead with camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, and they were going down to Egypt. And Judah said, hey, there's no profit in murder. Let's sell him into slavery and conceal his blood. The blood of Abel that cried out to God, they were planning to murder him, cover his blood so maybe it wouldn't scream out so loudly. What a deception. So, what profit is there, Judah said, if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and let not our hand, because after all, he is our brother. What a twisted. We won't kill him, we'll just sell him. After all, he's our brother. Then the Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph and lifted him up out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. And so the journey of Joseph continues. This exalted dreamer, he finds himself a slave and he's sold into Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife lies about him. I think Potiphar kind of knew it too, but he went and cast him into prison. He goes into prison and there he continues to be a dreamer and be one to interpret dreams. And finally, the Pharaoh has a dream and he's exalted out of that prison. When he finally sees his brothers, a great famine enters into the land and his brothers have to come into Egypt to get bread. They don't know what's happened to their brother. As far as they know, he's died in some sort of a slave, in some sort of a salt mine someplace. They don't know what's happened to him. But they show up and they're getting this. And finally they realize that the man who has the keys to all of the storehouse of good is their brother. And in verse 5 of Genesis 45, it says, "Do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." Verse 7 says, "And God sent me before you to preserve our posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by great deliverance." They thought they were thwarting the dreams of Joseph given to him by God by throwing him into a pit. They thought that was for his exaltation. They did not know that what God's plan is for their exaltation. Sometimes, if we're not careful, we'll let our envy get the best of us. We'll let our jealousy get the best of us. Or if we're Joseph, we will feel this inspiration from God, but we will allow, or things will just come against us and we will give up because of the darkness. But even in his time of prison, he refused to give up. He continued to serve the prison guards. He continued to serve. He was serving Potiphar's house. He became exalted in Potiphar's house. He became exalted within the prison because he kept the reality of what God had called him to front of his mind. The dreams that God had given him for who he was to be in this world were not thwarted by his circumstances. His circumstances did not define how he was going to live out his life. And so he blessed Potiphar, he blessed the prisoners and the prison guards, and then he blessed Pharaoh and Egypt, and finally the brothers that had betrayed him, he blessed them. And you see how it finally ends up. After their father died, they thought, surely Joseph is going to take vengeance on us. But Joseph says in Genesis 50, verse 20, but as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. It's not that God took him through all those things. God would have, had they not been evil men and jealous of their brother, he didn't have to go through all those things. He just did. And his character was manifested in that all of his suffering, he maintained his integrity. Judah, by the way, if you read the Judah story following Genesis 37, you'll see that Judah went through some very hard things. And when Judah had a moment in front of Joseph, when Judah basically said, take me, don't take Benjamin, he didn't know who Joseph was. But Judah offered himself up into slavery. Oh, then Joseph knew the heart of Judah had been turned through his experience. So whether you find yourself of an evil descendant of Abraham or a righteous descendant of Abraham that is being attacked, and by the way, they're both, Ernie, that's in both all of us. We all have that righteous calling that God has called us to, and sometimes we have sometimes we give $5 to the guy in the Walmart, and sometimes we're cursing the guy in the car. Right? So evil happens, and that is not God's thing. When something evil happens, do not think that God is engaged in that evil. But believe you me, that when evil does happen, the God of heaven is not thwarted by that evil. His plans for you and me are no less sure. And we've got to remember that. When the psalmist is thinking back of this, he in Psalm 105, notice what he says there. At the beginning of Psalm 105, he says, make known his deeds, verse 1. Sing to him the psalms to him that talk of his wondrous works. That's in verse 2. Glory his name. Verse 4 says, seek the Lord in his strength. Seek his face evermore. When we're going through things, the call for us to seek the face of God in those events, God is saying, just like Abraham realized suddenly that he had been in the presence of the Lord, and just like Jacob wrestled with this man and realized he was wrestling with the angel of the Lord, and just like Joseph finally at the end of his life probably looked over that history and said, that was no accident. That man I met in my wandering when I was disillusioned, when I didn't know where I was, that man that I met, that was an angel of God guiding me along my way. We have got to reflect back on our life and not take our momentary suffering as being definitive of who we are or where we're supposed to be in God. God has a plan for us, and he has asked us to step into that plan and trust him and to seek his face in those moments. And my God, sometimes it is hard to look at the face of adversity and actually see the face of God in it. But if we'll see that all sin and suffering has a bright end when God reconciles all things to himself, including sin and suffering. And when he says here, Reflect on these things, O children of Jacob, his chosen ones. O children of Jacob, his chosen ones. That's all 12 of them, by the way. So if you found yourself as a Judah or as a Reuben, the verdict's not out on you. You're still a chosen one. But he goes down here in the 16th verse, he says, moreover, he called for a famine in the land. He destroyed all the provision of bread, and he sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with fetters. They laid on him those irons until the time that his word came to pass, that the word of the Lord tested him. Joseph had the word that had come to Joseph was a test to him when he was sitting there in these various events of his life. He had to maintain his trust in God through those difficult times. He had to continue to look back on it. Remember the high times when you know God has spoken to you. Do not think that your low valley moments or your pit moments, when you're farthest away from the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down to you, when you're the farthest away from that, do not look at that as your definitive moment. Look at the time when God spoke definitively to you and hold on to that one. And he made him Lord and ruler of the house and ruler of his possessions. And all Israel came into Egypt, and he increased his people greatly. What a powerful story. So this is an example. Joseph is an example of somebody who was going along in life, and evil men did evil things to him, and somehow God was present with him and brought him out of that pit and out of that prison. Look over here at 1 Kings, the 19th chapter. This is a story about Elijah. Now, the pre-story of this is that Elijah had this fantastic victory over the prophets of Baal. They're destroyed. He had prayed that it would rain because it had been a famine for 3.5 years. He had prayed that it would rain, and it rained not for 3.5 years. He prayed again on Mount Carmel, and the rains began to descend on him. Well, he hears, a messenger is sent to him from Jezebel, the wife of the king Ahab. And verse 19, verse 1 says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how that he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So she brings down a curse on herself that she is committed to killing him because of what he has done to the prophets of Baal. Now, instead of him falling back into the victories that God has given him already and trusting God, and how many of us have been in that same place, how many of us have left the altar on a Sunday with a new commitment of faith and grace, and we go out the doors and Monday morning we're slapped in the face with the realities of the world, and we fall back in discouragement about either our own spirit or just the ugliness of the world, right? So he arises, he goes a day's journey out. God finally gives him some angels' food, and for 40 days, he's moved by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days on the power of that angel's food. So he has met now an angel in the wilderness. He's met an angel in the wilderness, and in that 40-day journey, he finds himself, it says in verse 8 of 1 Kings 19, into Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and there he went into a cave. And God said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? See, Elijah couldn't take much more. So it's just God saying, what are you doing, Elijah, in this cave? And Elijah responds in verse 10, I'm alone. Everyone has forsaken you. I'm the only one. And they seek to take my life. Just kill me, Lord. So here's a guy who's depressed, the adversity against him, maybe his own little, maybe schlep rock and there's a little dark cloud that just has to follow him. I don't know. But I have felt this way before. I have felt overwhelmed and felt alone. And it says that he says, go stand at the mouth of the cave. So he comes out of the mouth of the cave, and a big wind comes like a tornado. Then an earthquake comes, and then a fire flies. He must be in Southern California. That's where Mount Horeb is. SoCal, right? A fire, a wind, and that's the Santa Anas, followed by the earthquakes, followed by the fires. And then the New King James says, and after the fire, a still small voice. But some of your translation says, complete quiet, or the sound of silence. And sometimes when we're in those moments, if we can just step away and we can just get quiet, the Lord can speak to us again. So he speaks again to him and he says, why are you here? And he says, I am alone and they seek to kill me. And he says, nope, that's not the answer. I want you to go anoint the king of Syria, Hazael. I want you to go anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, the king over Israel, which, by the way, Jehu ends up fulfilling in 2 Kings 9, the curse that Jezebel brought down on herself. The Lord do so to me, and more also if you're not dead by tomorrow. Be careful let our mouths be mouths of fountains of blessing and not cursing against anyone, even bad people. Let our mouths be mouths of, because sometimes we don't know, there's a boomerang effect to bad words, as there are with good words. So say good things. And anoint Elisha. And then when he got done with that, he says, and by the way, I have 7,000 that have not bowed their knee to Baal. You think you're alone? There's an us here. Give us this day. You think you're alone? Come to the us, because in that place, you're going to find that there are 7,000 that have not bowed the knee to Baal. God is not without witness. And when you're finding yourself in those dark places, when you're finding yourself with the sound of silence and you thinking that God may be moving you out of your darkness or your depression or the caves, bring yourself to the us, because it's there where the 7,000 are holding on and they're encouraging one another in love. Yes, there are people that will pursue us. There are people that want to see us dead. But God will reveal to you the us in the factor, because there's an us that he will give daily bread to. There's an us that is going through temptation. There's an us that are being delivered from the evil one. Whether her name is Jezebel or Satan or whatever the name of that us, that evil one is, God has a people that will bring protection to that individual. Never be alone. Never be alone. And then just finally, I'm going to close with this in Matthew, because you sang about it, so I'm closing with it there. Matthew, the 14th chapter. And in Matthew, the 14th chapter, Jesus has just ministered on one side of the Sea of Galilee, and he sends his disciples back across the sea. The hour had gotten late. These are seasoned sailors. They're fishermen. They know what they're doing on that sea. And now when they got out, it says in verse 24, they got now into the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And now here's a kind of a situation where You've got people that do bad things. We've got a mind that can grow dark and like Elijah and do bad things. And we've got now things that are just outside of anybody's control. The sea, the wind. Who has control of that? Who has control of the sea and the wind? It says, but now the boat was in the middle of the sea and it was tossed. These men were out of control. Now the fourth watch of the night, which, by the way, I don't know about you, but this fourth watch of the night is the darkest, coldest part of the night before the sun comes up. I used to work for a company out in California doing construction, and my job was to open up the doors to all the construction site in the morning before the contractors got there. Well, they got there early. And I don't know what it was about those California with it. I'm looking at you, Larry Gibson. You're the kind of guys that showed up at like 5 a.m. So some 19-year-old kid had to get out of bed to get there so I didn't get a tongue lashing from some old welder. So I would wear a t-shirt, a flannel shirt, a hoodie, and a fleece Levi jacket. And I'd go up that hill, and that somehow the wind coming off the ocean, it just would bite right through all of that. It could be 50 degrees, like nothing here, but it would be biting cold there. That's where these guys are. Wet, cold, fatigued, and scared. And in the fourth watch, Jesus came walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled and they said, "It's a ghost," and they cried out with fear. And immediately Jesus began to speak to them, "Be of good cheer." It's like a preacher. When you're in the dark place and a preacher tells you, "Be of good cheer, trust God, look through remember the promises." And maybe I'm doing that today. Remember the promises. Jesus says, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command that I come out and walk on that sea." Command. I love his energy. Later on, when Jesus says the night before he's betrayed, he says, "Though all betray you, Lord, I will not betray you." And he said, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me." But here he's going out again, but this is a characteristic of Peter, and I love it. He says, "Come out, Lord, if it is you, bid me to come out of the water." And he said, "Come." And Peter got down on the water, and he got out of the boat, and he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Never forget that. But sometimes on our journey, our faith begins. We start to see what looks like reality. It may look like I'm surrounded by enemies, by mental storms, by depression, discouraging events, or the uncontrolled chaotic waves. It may seem that I'm surrounded, but there's a reality. So what we see sometimes is not the reality that God wants us to latch onto, but that's what happened to Peter. When he saw that the wind was boisterous, when he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." Probably not that slow and deliberate. It was probably more like, "Lord, save me." Just like later on, when at the end of the 26th chapter of Matthew, when Peter finally denied him, he was sinking in the waves of public opinion when this little maiden says, "And you're with him too, your speech betrays you." And he says, "I never knew the man." Now, how far is that descending from your confident approach that says, "I will never"? They may all desert, thank you, there's a D word. They may all desert you, but I will not. And now he has sunk beneath the waves of public opinion, even the opinion of a little maiden? How threatened we can become by the smallest little things. But God is saying, and then he heard the cock crow, but it said, Lord, save me. And immediately, he did not wait for Peter to build up his faith, go through a new catechism, or do anything else. All it was one quick prayer, Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately reached out. We should be like our Father. We should be like our Lord Jesus, who immediately responds to the repentance or the cries of our brother or our sister. Let's be that kind of people. And let's realize that when we find ourselves sinking beneath the chaotic waves that we have no control over in our life, that God will immediately, don't think, don't wait, don't let a night go into your fear. Don't let fear will destroy the human soul. Reach out and trust that there's a God in heaven that will reach down and immediately take a hold of your hand. And he says, and while he's doing it, O you of little faith. So here, there's a little correction that happens in the middle of it. Why did you doubt? And when they got in the boat, and you'll remember Neil's words from a few weeks ago, think about the journey back to the boat. I mean, how did they get back? I mean, did he make Peter swim laps? What do you think he did here? They walked back to the boat, and they got into the boat, and the wind ceased, and those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. See, they believe. 2 chapters later, he's going to say, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Right here, when he saw that the power over wind and waves was also in this person, they worshiped. Whatever it was that God did in this man, Jesus Christ, he gave him and endowed him with the power over chaos. And he'll give us the power over chaos. And the very last words out of Jesus' mouth, and remember this, the very last words out of Jesus' mouth is, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. The very last words the disciples hear is, I am with you always. So he may manifest himself as a wandering man, as a man that you encounter in your wandering in a field. He may find himself as 7,000 that have not bowed their knee to Baal. He may manifest himself in the chaos and reaching down, and God himself in your moment of need pulling you out of it. But you may think that you're surrounded, but I'm surrounded by him. It's in him we live and move and have our being. Have confidence in that. No matter what you go through in the weeks and the months to come, no matter what hardships, there's a God who can turn evil into good. And that good can lead not just to the salvation of Israel, but the salvation of the world. And here we are as proof 2,000 years later, that their stumbling in their little faith, they recovered themselves, and we're still talking about them today. Praise God. Do you have a confidence in God today? I do. Trust in God. Trust him when all those dark shadows gather. Trust him when the sun is no longer shining. Trust him. He's worthy of trust. All right. Do we have a closing song, Will? All right. Let's all stand.